Hey y'all, welcome to the Healing Space Live and Online Chats with Roxanne and Rhonda, the podcast where guests will share information and research on self-love, living a wellness-filled life, how to heal from traumatic events, and more. This podcast is sponsored by Healing Hearts and Minds Publishing, LLC, a new company that publishes books that promote self-love, healthy relationships, avoidance of unhealthy relationships, and much, much more. Check out their first publication, Unhealthy Relationships, Let's Stop the Madness, a guide for those in unhealthy relationships and for those who want to help them. Written by first-time author and co-host of the Healing Space Live and Online, Roxanne Elizabeth Epperson. Visit Amazon.com to purchase the paperback or ebook. Enjoy the show. Hey y'all, welcome to another episode of the Healing Space Live and Online Chats with Roxanne and Rhonda. Boy, do we have a good topic for you today. We're going to be talking to a marriage and family therapist. Is that correct, Carli?
It
and
is.
A sex therapist. So our Carli King is our marriage and family counselor, and Avi Diamond is our sex therapist. And after Rhonda says a few words, we're going to turn it over to our guest and get started. I'm real excited about this topic. Go ahead, Rhonda.
Hello, Carli and Avi. Thank you so much for being here today. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hello to our audience. We're so glad you're back with us today, or if it's your first time, thank you so much for joining us. Roxanne's going to tell you in the end where you can find us, so please listen out for that. But if you're already listening, you know where to find us. So we want to give you some choices of how to find us as well. So we thank you for being here. We appreciate you. And you know what? Next time, tell a friend, bring a friend. Avi and Carli, I cannot tell you. I honestly have awakened in the middle of the night thinking of something else I want to say and something else I want to say. So like Roxanne said, I am so excited. We are both excited for this topic. So you know what? I'm going to start in right with you, Avi, because Roxanne and I have had conversations, and you know, you and I had conversations when you were telling me you were going to be a sex therapist. I'm like, okay, that's nice. Congratulations. But truthfully is, I don't know for sure what a sex therapist does, and I'm sure a lot of our audience doesn't know. And Roxanne said to me, Rhonda, I thought a sex therapist was only for people who had sexual addictions. I'm like, no, it's more than that. So can you jump in for us and start by telling us, what does a sex therapist do, or what do you do as a sex therapist?
Sure. So yeah, it's something people have all sorts of ideas about what we do. But what we actually do is we help people who are having struggles within their sex life in any way. That could be dealing with the effects of sexual trauma. That could be with enriching their sex life and relationship with a partner, or within a marriage. That could be, like you said, we look at porn addiction as being compulsive sexual behavior. So that's a whole other conversation. We don't look at it as addiction, generally. And yeah, it's really just about helping people improve their quality of life through a part of their life that a lot of people are afraid to talk about and address.
Wow.
You know what? Because I always wondered, I can't think of the young lady's name who was held hostage for all that time, and she's finally released, and she's doing wonderful work now, advocacy work, and she's married and in a healthy marriage, and now has children. And I'm like, how in the world did she overcome the abuse that she endured? Because she was sexually violated during that. I don't know. I went to get the full had her hostage for over a year, I believe. I'm not sure. And I don't know if a baby came out of that sexual assault or not, but how do they deal with that? And then how do people who have got pregnant from a rape, how do they handle that?
That's not something specifically that I've worked with, but I mean, I think it would just be like any other trauma-informed approach, like helping the individual first, like, come to terms with what's happened, learn that it's not their fault, process what actually happened, and then when they're ready, kind of like with domestic violence work, like reforming their new identity as somebody who's not just a victim, but somebody who's a survivor and a person beyond what's happened to them, and they're not defined by that. So I think a big part of that work is helping people move into the future.
Great.
Avi, I'm glad you mentioned domestic violence, because later in the conversation we want to talk a little more about that for sure. And I also appreciate what you just said, helping people understand they're not defined by their trauma or by what happened to them. Roxanne, if I remember correctly, the situation you described, I do believe there was a baby born out of that hostage situation as well. So I do know, I remember pretty clearly. I think that is accurate. So yeah.
I always wonder, how does a mother end up? You can't help but love a baby, because a baby is, the baby had nothing to do with it. But especially if this baby comes out looking just like the perpetrator, I wonder, that might be kind of difficult. But
television. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
A television show that, I'm not saying I recommend this show or not. I have watched it, but it's called The Shy, and they had that exact situation on there. Do you watch that, Carli? I see you nodding your head. Yeah,
I do.
That situation on there, and a young girl was taken hostage, and he raped her. She had a baby. Well, first, the mother, once she was released and back home, the mother wanted her to consider aborting the baby, and she couldn't go. She started to, but she couldn't go through with that. So long story, a long description short, they came down, because I thought they did a really good job of that, because it's art on TV and it's people's real life. And in the end, that was one of the questions the mother said to her, when she decided to keep it, what are you going to do when this baby comes out looking like him? But like you said, you're still going to love the baby, So it's on hiatus right now, or some break with that. Or did it go off? Is it finished, Carli? Is it another season? Do you remember?
I'm not sure about that, but it is off air right now. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So anyway, so Carli, how about we just ask you the same question we was asking, because marriage and family therapist. Tell us what you do as a marriage and family therapist, and how do you get clients and referrals?
So as a marriage and family therapist, I work with both individuals and couples. Many of us also work with families, children. So it's kind of individual to the therapist, but we kind of encompass that whole umbrella. To try and simplify it, the thing that kind of distinguishes us from other types of therapists is that we tend to look at things systemically. That's kind of the common thread amongst most marriage and family therapists. And all that means is, instead of maybe looking at like cause and effect, or like focusing really heavily on diagnosing, we tend to look at things circularly, right? Like a cause has an effect, which has a cause, which has an effect, and so we tend to look at the entire system. As I said, I work with individuals, adults only right now. I no longer see children. I have in the past. And I primarily work with couples. I really, really love doing premarital work. So that's like one of my favorite groups to work with. Right now, the majority of my referrals come from Psychology Today, which is a site that just allows you to search for different types of therapists and professionals in the mental health space. And so I signed up for that initially, to just kind of get a clientele going. And it has more than sustained like my caseload. So at this point, I get referrals from colleagues. I also work with a practice in Stamford, Connecticut, where I get referrals as well. But right now, that seems to sustain my caseload pretty decently.
So she answered that one. So this question is: Do you notice a theme amongst your clients? For instance, Avi is focusing on sex therapy. Is bedroom problems often the precipitating issue with your clients?
With me?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It can be kind of tucked in there. But typically when couples come to me, the most common issue that I hear about, communication issues. Everyone defines their problems as like a communication issue. Sometimes conflict resolution, you'll hear things like that. Usually there's some sort of life stage transition or some sort of change taking place. Maybe the couple is moving. Maybe they just got married, want to get married, transitioning into parenthood, things like that. So those are probably the most common reasons that people come to therapy, I would say. And then intimacy issues and bedroom problems are often discussed as a result of kind of talking about what's going on there. So,
Avi, does any of that kind of correlate the same thing with you?
Yeah, definitely. Infidelity is another big issue that seems to come up. Like people, somebody cheats and then they want to see if they can work through it with the help of a therapist.
Wow. Can couples usually work through infidelity, or is it like this is the bottom line? This is it.
They can. I mean, I think it depends on how strong the couple's foundation is, like how, what their respect is like for each other, what their foundation is like, what their values are, I guess, around cheating and what that means to them, because like there's just so much more underneath that. Usually it's usually like a symptom of a lot of other things that are going wrong in the relationship.
Yeah, and I've definitely heard people say, especially women, I've definitely heard women say, if he cheats on me, that's it, I'm done, I'm out. And then in that same conversation, another woman speaks up saying, I'm not letting him go for that because it means more than just him cheating. I'm not going to say I'm happy about him cheating, but it's more than just him cheating. He's going to have to stay around for that. Because one of the women said, oh, no, he's not leaving me after that. Because I got business for him. So she was going to punish him. No, her thing was, I'm going to keep him so I can punish him. Stuff. Hey, also, what about, we hear with sexual dysfunctions. I don't know if that's the proper language. But with sexual dysfunctions, we hear a lot about with men. We hear about erectile dysfunction, ED, commercials on TV about it, and what about women in sexual dysfunction? Is there such a thing? We think, oh, of course not, it's not me, but what about that? And then there's same-sex couples as well. So what about with sexual dysfunctions for women or maybe even in the same-sex couple? Any comments around that?
Oh yeah, like it's very prevalent. I think the fact that it's not talked about so much is just a reflection of, how our society is very focused on men's needs more than women generally, I would say. And yeah, I mean, a lot of women struggle with arousal, with, feeling like afraid. There's a really pretty common issue called vaginismus, where the vagina like tightens up every time somebody tries to have sex, or like it can even be with a tampon for some people. And yeah, there are a lot of different sexual dysfunctions for all genders. So it's very prevalent, but there's not enough research out there for people to easily obtain help with those issues for women and non-binary folks. Yeah.
That's amazing. I never thought about it as in, because in our society, it's more typical to have something for men to get their needs met. Wow. That's interesting. Okay. Hey, Carli, how about, I know Roxanne asked you about that as well, about if the couple, if it's precipitating, and you said they usually come with things about communication and conflict resolution, but in your practice, when you're seeing couples, do they talk about, say, maybe the same kind of things with Avi? Do they talk about maybe having problems with intimacy? You said that may come up
absolutely
a little later.
Oh, absolutely. It certainly comes up typically when people are reaching out for help. Because of a lot of shame around intimacy issues, they may lead with the thing that they feel is maybe more acceptable or more common or feels more normal. And so a lot of times we get into therapy and they're kind of saying, okay, it's communication issues. And we talk about, okay, what's happening with your communication? And then we start talking about it and we start to understand what's really going on underneath. Maybe there's some sort of emotional need not being met. So that's affecting intimacy because maybe one person doesn't want to be as close to the other person, things like that. So yeah, once we kind of get underneath what's going on, oftentimes in talking about the effects of the problem, we start to, get into the intimacy issues and things of that nature. So.
Okay. All right.
I like, did you have a follow-up, Rhonda?
No, you know what, Roxanne, I'm gonna let you know just before you turning your mic off in between, because right before you speak, we can see your lips moving and kind of like a 1 second delay. You're not turning your mic off? Okay, all right. Because I keep looking at you like I think you're ready to jump in there. So
Maybe I was. I don't know. Who knows? Technology, we gotta love it, right? But this question was supposed to be geared towards Avi, but I think both of you, I'd like to hear from both of you on this one about makeup sex. So it's often thrown around after a couple has had a fight, and like Rhonda says, and Rhonda came up with these questions, and she's just excellent at this. So, and she mentions how our format is about healthy relationships and intimate partner violence, and we were just wondering if both of you could tell us what your opinion is on makeup sex, and I'll just tell you mine. I can't imagine after fighting. Then I'm gonna tell you a horrible story before you answer that. So I had a neighbor, and there was domestic violence over the top of my head, which, me being a domestic violence advocate, that just was crushing my heart. I hear these people, a young couple upstairs fighting, and about a half an hour later, I hear her oohing and awing because they're having sex. And that just, I was so upset. But the oohing and awing, it was probably fake because she probably could not have been wanting to do that. That's what I'm thinking in my mind. Am I wrong in thinking that? Do people really enjoy that? Either one of you, both of you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the situation, but part of why makeup sex is a thing, as a concept, is because, emotions are just so tied to intimacy. And I think sometimes when there's a lot of passion and you've just had a fight kind of like diffuse, that release can create space for a really intense sexual experience. So that's not just created through arguing, like that can also be through having a really in-depth conversation with a partner and being vulnerable in that conversation, and there's a relaxation and peace. Well, maybe not peace in the situation you're talking about, but there's a release that comes from that, and that can create space for a really intense sexual experience.
Oh, wow. Has that come up in your sessions, Carli?
Sure. I agree with Avi in that every case is very different because in many ways, makeup sex can be a great way of reconciling and rekindling in a safe relationship. And so it can be a wonderful way of making amends to some degree or reconnecting after, like she mentioned, a difficult argument. But in cases where safety is an issue or there's physical violence, that is a whole different level of I would say intervention that's necessary. So in my particular work, if there is intimate partner violence going on, I actually will not see couples in that case. I will refer them out for other services until we can make sure that their physical safety is not a factor, because so much of the work that we're going to do is going to focus a lot on emotional safety. And if your physical safety is being compromised, I can't, in good faith, encourage you to be more vulnerable and open and sharing when your physical safety is at risk. So Like I have particular ways of dealing with it. If it's happened in the past, we might talk about a safety contract and have some sort of requirements in order to safely participate in couples therapy. So in my work, I tend to encourage it because that baseline has already been established, that it is a safe space for that. So I think what you're describing would not necessarily fit in there, but I think makeup sex can be a great thing for a relationship.
I'm glad you mentioned that about going to couples therapy, because when I first started doing this work, I was trying to develop a partnership with a therapist at a church. And I'm not going to say the person's name, but or the church, but a friend of mine was in an abusive relationship, and I suggested she go to this therapist, and the therapist encouraged her and the mate to go to couples therapy together. I'm like, and me not being a therapist, I didn't think that made a lot of sense to, but that's what she recommended. And her theory was she felt like because she had so many sons, she knew all about how males think and this, that. So she felt like she was an authority on the subject of relationships. But I was like, nah, the relationship didn't work. Thank God she got out. I even went to court with her. She had to go to domestic violence court, and I accompanied her, and the relationship did end. But yeah, thank you for encouraging them to go elsewhere and fix it first.
Yeah. I wanted to jump. I'm really happy that Carli mentioned that, because there are certain situations in which couples therapy is contraindicated, and a relationship in which power and control is present. Yeah, you can't really see a couple who's in a situation like that, because we need that baseline of basic respect and basic willing to be accountable. And in a situation where the power is uneven, you can't really have that. Like I would absolutely see someone individually if they came to me as a couple and one person wanted support. But yeah, I wouldn't see a couple that is in a domestic violence relationship, and I would know exactly where to refer them. So to the Women's Center Child Therapy. So yeah.
Great.
I'm glad both of you are talking about domestic violence or intimate partner violence, because that's something we did want to bring into this conversation. What do you do if you uncover it? Some couples are very good at masking it, and I'm all due respect to the victim survivor, because that person's not masking it. That person's doing what they have to do to survive and to be safe, to be as safe as they can, even in therapy. Many years ago, I did therapy, and this was before you had to have an MSW or be licensed, but I actually was called a therapist, and that's not my background. It's even when I decided to get a master's, that's not what my master's degree is in. However, this was in, I'm getting ready to date myself, but it's all right, I don't mind. This was in the early, let me just say from early to mid 80s. And I had a couple who I was working with. And not until I later went to work for Women's Center Shelter in Greater Pittsburgh. Thank you, Avi, for the shout out. But not until I went to work there and learned about domestic violence, intimate partner violence, did I know that couple back in the 80s had to be living with intimate partner violence. It breaks my heart to this very day, because I can still see this couple. And I wasn't titled with doing marriage counseling or family counseling. Well, it was family counseling, but it wasn't marriage counseling. I worked in a group home at what was then Wellstel, is now Family Link. And the parents needed to be involved in order for the kids to stay in the program, particularly if they was working for reconciliation. Some kids went on to foster care. I remember this couple, and I sit back now, and it tears at my heartstrings, the things that I said to this couple. Because now I realize the imbalance of power that was right in front of me, and I didn't know it, I remember saying things like, well, she really needs a life. And I don't remember the names now, but we'll say Jane and John Doe. But I remember saying, well, Jane doesn't have any outside activities. And he was still like, yeah, Jane, why don't you get some activities? And she would just shudder like, no, I just like being home. I like being around the family. And then one of the things he would use against her, then I'll just leave. This relationship's not working. I'll just leave it. She would almost grovel and beg him to stay. And now when I look back at that, there were other things, other signs that I didn't know to look for. So I was just wondering if in your practice, and we'll say Avi first and Carli, because we'd like to hear from both of you this, and I can hear your skill and your knowledge. But I'd like our audience to be real clear on this, please. In your practice, when you are seeing a couple, and maybe you've already seen them 2, 3 times, but now you have uncovered, or it's real clear to you, this is an imbalance of power. This is intimate partner balance. Does it change the trajectory of your sessions in house, though, or why not? Can you just both of you address that?
I would probably see both partners individually so as not to draw attention to the fact that I was seeing the victim individually. And yeah, I would just safety plan with that person, and I would make sure they got, all the referrals they needed. I might meet with, if they had an individual therapist, I might try to get a release of information to talk to that therapist and, see what support they're getting. And yeah, I think I would have to discontinue the couples therapy at a certain point, just because we can't do couples work if there's an imbalance of power. It's just not, it's contraindicated at that point. But I'd make sure they have all the support and resources they need from outside services that specialize in domestic violence.
Okay.
Yeah, similarly, I just, as a standard in working with couples, always do an individual session with both people regardless. That creates an opportunity at the very beginning. We might meet together initially, but then probably our second and third, or maybe third and fourth session will probably be individual sessions with each person. So that gives me an opportunity to just talk about some of those things and ask questions that might help to uncover that. I also mentioned in my informed consent, especially with all my couples who have children, we're talking about limits to confidentiality. So we're talking about child abuse and situations where I would be required to break confidentiality and report. So I do try to clarify what that means. I have practiced in different states, so laws are different in different states, so that can mean different things depending on where you are. But we'll talk about things like physical violence in front of the children. And so I try to kind of clarify those bounds initially so that they kind of understand what fits within that. So there are a few opportunities for it to come out if they're willing to share. But I think what you're asking is well, what if they're not sharing, but it's kind of coming out maybe in the way they're describing things. And so I think that those kind of have to be handled case by case. If the person is simply denying it or unwilling to share, it does make it very hard for me as the therapist to do much about that or to try and address it in any real helpful way other than to offer resources like Avi mentioned in an individual session. So I might provide them with information just to say, well, if you ever need it, or if anything ever changes or this ever escalates, then you'll have these resources. But if I become clear that that is happening, or I'm seeing things in session that look unsafe or almost dangerous, I'm going to address it pretty directly. And that's for the client's safety. That's because our work is compromised without that. So much in the same way, I'm not going to continue seeing a couple where I know that's a factor because our work really would not be helpful or even safe for both people.
She just answered my next question, which was how do you address potential child abuse with the parents? So you did address that. So this would be an opportune time for us to welcome and say thank you to our sponsor, Rhonda.
All righty. So Roxanne and I are very proud that we do have a paid sponsor for our podcast. And it's from Lutheran Settlement House out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And Lutheran Settlement House has a plethora of services. And I'm going to start with mentioning that they have a domestic violence program and services there. Though they don't have a specific shelter, they do referrals for shelter, and they also have address homelessness as well and food access at Lutheran Settlement House. They also have a teen program in the summertime that I just love hearing about. I started my work working with teens. I love hearing about teenagers doing positive things. They have a really good summer program that they do also. So thank you to Lutheran Settlement House. If you are in the Philadelphia area as you listen to this and you need their number, you can reach them at their local number, area code 215-426-8610. And they're at 1340 Frankfort Avenue. I'd always call first, particularly in the times that we live in now with COVID. You need to make sure who's in the office, is the office open, etc. But that is their address and their phone number. And we give a shout out to Lutheran Settlement House, and we thank them for being our first paid sponsor. First means we're looking for our second and our third and so forth and so on. But thank you to them for sure.
And as Wanda said, yes, thank you, Lutheran Settlement House. We are looking for more sponsors. And if you're interested in sponsoring us, you can reach us at info@warheals.org. That's info@warheals.org. And I will be mentioning this connection again at the end of the podcast. So thank you, guys. Yeah. So go ahead.
Is it okay if we jump back to the child abuse thing just really quickly? Because I just had one quick thing to add that I think is just important to say. A lot of times when there's maybe a gray area with the child abuse, or maybe a parent is just uninformed, there is really a need for psychoeducation around child abuse and like how it's defined and the effects that it has on children. So I find that when that's maybe unclear, or maybe there's a case where something's already been reported and now the family is in therapy, psychoeducation is a very, very important piece of that, because a lot of parents may just not know and may be perpetuating things they've seen or think would be effective. And so I think it's important, to kind of point that out, because there are a lot of things that qualify as like emotional abuse that many people might find very normal. So I try to, I want to say that and kind of, I think it's just important to have that empathy and understanding for parents who a lot of times are doing the best they know how to do, but they might need more information to be able to do that a little bit better. So
what about yelling at the children? How does that fit into, verbal abuse? Is that what that would be called?
Absolutely. I mean, it certainly can be. And that's why I say, like, even different states define it differently. So that's what I'm saying in terms of, you can have a conversation with parents about the effects of that yelling and what might be more effective in actually altering the behavior that they're wanting to see change, as opposed to like further damaging the child, or in some way like causing some sort of developmental issue for the child. So that's a common example. I don't know many parents that have not raised their voice at some point, myself included, right? But if we have better tools, then maybe, we have something different to pull on in those moments, and we have a better understanding of the damage that's caused if we don't.
I always say that I'm a victim of verbal abuse from my mother, and I never knew that she even realized that she was doing it until one day, God rest her soul, and I have forgiven her, but she was not a pleasant person to live with. And when she was sick, she had to stay at my house. She couldn't be by herself anymore. And one of those talk shows was on, and they were talking about child abuse or whatever. And all of a sudden she hollers out, "Yeah, Roxanne, I abused you." And I was like, she said, "But you deserved it." And I'm like, oh my gosh. And that comment led to like a 3-hour crying spell. And at the time she was in therapy, her case manager, when I shared with the case manager what had happened, and she said to me, you better go get you some therapy. She said, because a lot of people who are caregivers end up in therapy. And, I did go to therapists. I went to a therapist at Western Site here in Pittsburgh. And I was there all of half an hour, and he wanted to put me on medication. I'm like, excuse me, sir, I just had a crying spell because my mama said she recognized that she abused me and I deserved it. Why I got to go on medication? So I didn't quite understand that. But, and then a family member recently told me that she's learned to stop yelling at her daughter because she realized, she said, I'm hollering at her and all she's hearing is wah, wah, wah. She's like tuning her out. And I'm like, yeah, it's the same as in an intimate relationship. And your mate's hollering and screaming at you. Nobody wants to be hollered and screamed at, So, I don't even know where I was going with that, but it just brought back what I experienced and how I felt. And I'm 66 years old and it still stings. And that's what I told my family member. I said, yeah, I'm so proud of you for figuring this out so that you and your child can have a good relationship. But I'm 66 and I still feel the sting from what my mother did to me. So she's nipping it in the bud early. So hopefully anybody out there who's doing that to their child, stop it. Listen to these ladies. They know what they're talking about. Okay. I'm sorry.
I think it's really important you brought that up though, just because that's such a big part of therapy is figuring out where did wounds come from and where did these patterns start that eventually can manifest within a couple system or within a family system. So I think it's really brave and important that, you're sharing your personal story so other people know that that's something that happens and that you can get help for that.
I'm always telling my business. My stuff was in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Okay, go ahead, Rhonda. I'm sorry.
Well, first, I thank you always, Roxanne, for being so transparent. I really do. And I feel your pain even if you shared that. So as always, I do thank you for sharing that for sure. Avi, what about being mandated reported? And in sex, see, Roxanne is transparent around her life and her history. I'm transparent around my ignorance. It's just, this is some things I don't know. And I guess I think of couples coming to sex therapy aren't parents. I know it sounds stupid. It's just, maybe it does. Maybe somebody else listening felt that same way. I guess I think of couples coming to sex therapy as, I don't know, maybe I think of them as younger. I don't know. I don't often think of them as parents though. So can you help me with that?
Yeah, they are any and all demographics. So, I have parents, I have young people, I have people who are about to get married. Anyone can deal with these issues at any point in their life. So it's a pretty wide range. And sometimes part of what we're working on is creative ways for parents to be able to have intimacy together while raising small children, because that in itself is very challenging to find space for that and to create a context where that's even desirable, when you've just gotten done dealing with a screaming 7-year-old, that's not exactly setting the mood.
Yeah. Hey, I just read in the Essence magazine just this week. Now, I guess it's what month is this? December. So I think it was their October, November issue. I'm not sure it's October, November, December. But anyway, it was an interview with a sex therapist. I'm like, oh, really? I'm just getting ready to talk about it. Here's it. And I did appreciate some of the tips they gave. And one of the tips they gave was to make sex the whole day long. In other words, send them notes or make little phone calls or say things throughout the day. As you said, to kind of help set the mood for later. Because when you get home, you're dealing with kids and homework and So just kind of set the mood how you can throughout the day. And then they also said sometimes just practice breathing, no touch, just look at each other and just breathing together. And the other tip they shared was, and this one I said, I'm sure as a husband and wife or as a partner relationship you've been with, in X amount of time, whatever time that is. You may be comfortable doing this. And I guess also it would matter also if you've dealt with body shaming or presently dealing with body shaming, because they suggest just getting naked and sitting in front of each other and talk about body parts, and talk about like, I really like your muscles because they're really strong. It could be something as simple as, I really like how you help carry the groceries in, because they were saying really just to use the body parts and things like that to be complimentary. So that was the goal. And that was, again, I just happened upon that this week when I was reading that part of the essence. So I was like, okay, well, that's interesting to learn about. So, yeah.
It's called foreplay. I said it's called foreplay.
Yeah, and then they even have a little section on foreplay as well, and stopping after. It had a lot. Some things I'm not going to share. Get that essence if you want to read everything. I'm not comfortable sharing all that on the podcast. So.
Oh, why not? Why not? It's open. We're just it's all good. This is not a
Okay, I found, when I work with teenagers, I always tell them there's an appropriate way to say anything. So thank you, Roxanne. I found a way that makes it more comfortable for me to share. They said to also just sometimes watch your partner as a self-pleasure. So I couldn't say the M word on the podcast.
Wait a minute, say that again. They said to do what?
Watch your partner as a self-pleasure.
Oh, you don't want to say the M word? She's masturbation?
Oh, that word.
You're an adult. You're allowed.
Yeah.
And this is a very, we're adults. It's all
Okay.
open. It's okay. But I ain't mad at you for feeling that way, Wanda. You're allowed to feel the way you want to feel.
Thank you. So they did. That's one of the suggestions. So, Avi, do you give those kind of suggestions?
It totally depends on who I'm working with. I mean, I think that's what's great about having like an actual session is like I can cater whatever the person needs to them. And it's really hard to say that there's like one thing that's going to universally work for everyone. Everyone's bodies are so different. Everyone's experiences are so different. Like Carli was talking about, I mean, I'm also very systemic in my approach to therapy. So there's just so many different factors. So yeah, it's really hard to just say like, here's a list of things that will help all couples. Like it may or may not. But one thing I will say is that anxiety is a huge turnoff. So a big part of foreplay can actually be like doing yoga together or meditating together and really finding time to transition into an intimate emotional space. That's something a lot of people don't think of, but I have a lot of my couples doing yoga together and it's helped them a lot, like right before sex.
Here I go with another transparent story. So I'm like you, Rhonda. I don't know if I should say it or not, but anyway, I'm going to say it because foreplay is important. So I'm with this individual who is no longer in my life because he didn't get it. I'm at his home. Things are getting ready to happen, but they couldn't happen because he just wanted to roll over on top of me. I'm like, oh, wait a minute, hold up. It don't work like that. And I said something about where's the foreplay or something. I can't remember exactly what I said. And he was like, forget that. And commenced to trying to roll over me again. I said, boy, did you know that would be called rape? I'm telling you, stop. No, it ain't happening just like that. And if you proceed, that's called rape. And then the next thing was, I'm going home because he didn't get it, So I don't know why I had to say that, but I just think foreplay is important. And and no means no. I wasn't ready yet, so stop. Do not proceed.
Absolutely.
So anyway.
Yeah, good for you for having the agency to do that because that's critical. Yeah.
Look, I've been raped multiple. People know my story was in the Post-Gazette. Okay, I've been raped multiple times by different people. So that's sex to me is like it got to be a special somebody, because I feel some kind of way about it, and it's not always good. So maybe I need to come see you, Avi. I might need to have me a little session. Figure out for the next mate I might have in my life.
Use some names.
But anyway, yeah. So
Avi and Carli, this always happens. I just looked at the time, and
Yep.
I know.
Are we way over?
We're not way over, but we
Okay.
try to stick to 30 to 45 minutes, and we're at just about 48, 49 minutes. So, and I still have other questions I want to ask. And what I'm going to do is keep them in the folder and invite you all back, maybe in the spring or so, because there's a couple things we didn't get to touch on, and that is one is around divorce, and another one was around how COVID, being quarantined and living together in close quarters, and with the current situation, we may be coming upon that again. So we didn't get to touch on those kind of questions. So just a brief acknowledgement that if you're a couple out there and you are struggling with having to spend more time around your partner right now, we gave the Philadelphia hotline number. We also want to give the national hotline number, which is 1-800-799-SAFE, 1-800-7233. So that's the national hotline number for domestic violence. If you need somebody to talk to, and the one thing about hotlines, if you're like, well, it's not domestic violence, but that's the numbers we shared, call that number and they can get you to other numbers as well. Don't sit on it. Don't, as somebody mentioned shame earlier, don't let the shame be what stops you from getting the help you need and you deserve. So as we come to a closure, Roxanne will take us out, but I want to thank you both so much for agreeing. Thank you for just on a Saturday morning when we record this. Thank you for being able to get up and get involved. Really appreciate, love you both. Much appreciation.
Yes, me too. I really enjoyed this. And before we go, I would like to know if either of you have any products or services you would like to promote. Carli?
I am currently working on some couples groups for 2022. Some of those will probably be virtual and hopefully maybe in person as well. So keep an eye out for that. I am so happy to have come today and happy to come back. So hopefully I'll have more details then.
And soon, well, and when you get to, make sure you let me and Rhonda know too, because we'll promote it on my website.
Absolutely.
My website is warheels.org. So we'll have to create a little something on that site to let people know what our guests are up to. We haven't done that yet, but that sounds like a good addition to the site. Okay, Avi, what do you have?
I still have a couple slots left if people are interested in individual or couples therapy. I forgot to mention earlier, I specialize in trans and LGBTQ related issues as well.
Oh, cool.
Something else that I offer. And I'm also doing some music therapy groups for different organizations. So you can find me on Psychology Today, Avi Diamond, still working on the website.
Okay, great. And I'm glad you brought up the transgender community. We'll save that for the next topic too, Rhonda, because I did have a question about that as well, or that community as well. So as Rhonda said earlier, that I would let you know how to reach us. Warheels.org, WAARHEALS.org. If you want to email us, it's info@warheels.org. And just so you know, we air our podcast every Thursday at 5 p.m. on Pandora, Spotify, Apple, all the big ones and some of the small ones as well. And on the last Thursday of the month, we do a live Zoom podcast. And all of these podcasts are on YouTube as well. You can listen to us and watch us. But the last Thursday of the month, we do have an open panel discussion, and we've been having a good time with that. And I'm looking forward to these ladies coming back for part 2, because when I saw the questions that Rhonda had, the amount of them, I'm like, they definitely got to come back for part 2. And now I've thought about some more questions, so I'm excited to have you guys come back. Did I miss anything, Rhonda?
I don't think so.
I don't think so, but Rhonda and I just really wanted you to know that we got your back.
There are 2 things we would like you to do. Number 1, enter our monthly drawing by sending your email address to info@warheels.org. Spelled out, that is INFO@WAAR heals.org. Put drawing in the subject line. We will notify the winner or winners via email by midnight on the last Thursday of each month. Our second request, engage with us on IG. Follow, like, and subscribe to all of our social media platforms at warheals_ on IG, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. WAARHEALS_ on IG, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. As always, we thank you for listening and see you next week.